Hi, welcome to Box on the Box Rock and Celluloid, Botbrack for short. I'm Edward Box, so today I'm going to be looking at the Tony Martin era of Black Sabbath. So this is the era after Ian Gillan, after the brief, Tony Iommi's brief working with Glenn Hughes and Ray Gillan kind of filling in on the Seven Star tour. So I've got to admit, this isn't an era of Sabbath I really engaged with. The only track I'd really heard is The Headless Cross when I was younger. My mates and I would, be usually 3 sheets to the wind getting back from the pub, and there might be something like on like the Power Hour, or we might have a video copy of some metal videos, and the Headless Cross would be on it. And I've got to admit, we'd kind of laugh at it because it was so dramatic, the Headless Cross. But the thing is, I think really, I actually really like the song. And recently, Eric Gronholm did a great cover of the Headless Cross, and I think that brought home the epic power of it. And that kind of like made me go down the rabbit hole a bit more with the Tony Martin era. So Tony Martin, he gets overlooked because he's not Dio, because he's not Ozzy, he's not even Ray Gillan in all truth, or Glenn Hughes, or Ian Gillan, but he is a really good singer. And he did, him and Tony Iommi created I think some really good music, and kept the Sabbath name going. Now people will knock it, and obviously, the sales went down. And this precipitated really Tony Iommi getting back with Dio, then going back to Tony Martin again, and then finally reforming with Ozzy. But I do not think any of these albums do an injustice to the Black Sabbath name, apart from one maybe. So what happens is the Eternal Idols, the sort of convoluted story. Ray Gillan does the tour. They do demos with Ray Gillan. I've got to say, I do prefer the sound of Ray Gillan's voice on those demo versions, and I kind of prefer the production of the demo versions, But I think Ray Gillan's the great lost Sabbath singer in a way. Then Tony Martin came in, and they, he redid and he did the whole album. So I think The Eternal Idols is not a bad album. I think it's a great record, but I think it's a good 6 out of 10. The Shining's an excellent track. I'm just going to look at some notes here that I wrote down. I'll just refer to those. I might have to put my gigs on. But The Shining's an excellent track. Ronnie Romero's covered that recently. It's got all those hallmarks of this era. It's got the kind of Dio epicness, but it's kind of pushing the power metal thing that they've created that they've not kind of realised they created. Dio's been in Rainbow, he's got a Sabbath, they've got all these mystical lyrics, they've got all these elements, they've got this majesty and power, but it's not sort of, been sort of realised that it's this thing that we're going to call power metal, really. And I think with this, by this time, although they don't call themselves power metal, they don't realise they're power metal, they're embracing that sound and idea. And I think that's why this lineup of Black Sabbath is more popular in Europe. Obviously, the European markets, power metal is very popular. So this is why it was able to get a little bit more of a foothold there. Then you got Ancient Warrior, which is pretty good. Hard Life to Love, I'm not totally fussed about. But then you got Glory Ride, which I think is a great track. The Ray Gillan demo version of this is great as well. Just really majestic atmosphere on the verse. Brilliant chorus. Kind of let down by a strange middle section, but it's got great power metal lyrics. This great kind of battling and swords and stuff. You got Bought to Lose, Nightmare, they're okay. But Scarlet Pimpernel's a little instrumental. Again, Tony Iommi's putting on these little instrumentals to pad. Lost Forever, and then the title track Eternal Idol's excellent. So I think with this record, I think you've kind of got kind of two or three really standout cuts on it. But there's not a bad track really. So like I said, I'd give it a 6 out of 10. In all fairness, after kind of the difficulties with the Seventh Star and the tour and Ray Gillan, this just kind of gets the ball rolling. I think Tony Martin might have done some of the Seventh Star tour as well. I'm not sure, because he may have jumped ship. Ray Gillan, you could read this on Wikipedia. So next up, they do the Headless Cross, and this is really where they really kind of find their feet. They lose the deal with Vertigo. It comes to an end. They go to RS, which is Miles Copeland's record label. And I think Tony Iommi makes a bold move. Not a bold move, but he realises he needs really stellar players. He's got Tony Martin, but he needs kind of strength backing that up, because people don't know who Tony Martin is. So he gets Cozy Palin on drums. Now Lawrence Cottle plays bass on this album, but for the tour and videos, Nicky gets Neil Murray in, and this is actually a really strong, good Black Sabbath lineup. You got Cozy Powell on bass and Neil Murray, who are just two fucking stellar players. You've got Tony Iommi and Tony Martin, very good. And this album it gets a lot of respect in Europe. In the UK, US, it's fairly middling, but in Germany it makes number 18. It just won in Sweden, Swiss albums as well. And you often read online that there's a lot of affection out there for this album. I think something that lets it down is the bombastic production. It suffers from the 80s production. It's kind of swamped in reverb, and the drum sound, the snares like enormously huge. But that aside, the songs are really strong. It starts off with the Gates of Hell. It's a little instrumental. Tony's got to get one in. Then you've got the title track Headless Cross, which we know is a classic. Got to say, I actually prefer the single edit. I was more used to that. So it's 6 minutes 28. You got Devil and Daughter, which is kind of up tempo, really good. You got When Death Calls, which is kind of slow and evil, and then picks up tempo. Brian May does a guest solo on that. Then you got Killing the Spirit World and Call of the Wild, which are two kind of more commercial tracks. Not as good, but solid. Then the excellent Black Moon Rising. I see a black moon rising. Ray Gillan actually gets a co-write on this. Really good. And then he finishes with Nightwing, which is kind of epic ballad track. There is a bonus track on the Picture Disco Cloaking Down, which is alright, but it's really the 8 tracks. It's actually a 7-track album, really. It's kind of pretty old school because, Gates of Hell is just a short track. So yeah, All Music Guide gives it 4 stars. Martin Popoff 7 out of 10. Rock Hard 8 out of 10. It's just a couple of few ratings on the Wikipedia, but it is a good album. I think it'd be even better maybe with another track, replacing another, or maybe lose an instrumental, get a really good track in, slightly less bombastic production, but it's an album of its time. But I think what I'm trying to say is the idea that it's like Black Sabbath crap at this time is wrong. I think they're not making classic music. Although some people might argue there's some classics on this, but they're making good music. They're not driving it down the way that people might accuse them of. Then you've got TYR, so there's a real toss-up between Headless Cross and this album, which is the better one. I kind of I drift, really. I think this benefits from better production. It's slightly less bombastic. You got Neil Murray properly on bass, Jeff Nichols on keyboards, Cozy, Tony Martin, Tony Iommi. Again, it's a good lineup. You've got Sean Lynch engineering as well, who worked with Priest later on, Latham Masses mixing. So it's a good really good team on this album. Opens with Anno Mundi, which is excellent. It's a little kind of loose concept with this, with kind of Norse mythology and ancient, Britain history. Anno Mundi is really good. It's got crazy vocal harmonies on it. I think this is one of the very strongest tracks in the Tony Martin canon. The Lawmaker's really good. It's more up tempo, but it's really catchy. Then you've got Jerusalem, which where will you go to now, Jerusalem? Yeah, really catchy chorus. Managed to be really heavy, but it's catchy, excellent. You've got Sabbath Stones, which has got a really evil riff. It's heavy. It's called the Sabbath Stones. It's not going to be a ballad, is it? Very good. Then you've got the Battle of Tyr and Odin's Court. The Battle of Tyr's, it's a little instrumental, 1 minute and 8. He's at it again. And then Odin's Court, it segues in Odin's Court, which is a kind of ballad, short ballad piece. I guess things like Solitude. And then you go into Valhalla, which is a proper power metal. I mean, Vikings, that is the staple of power metal. They've actually called us on Valhalla, but it works really well. Very, very good track. Then you've got the ballad Feels Good to Me. Now, the band say in the notes here that they were like kind of, you've got to do a ballad, you've got to do something kind of singlish. And yeah, it doesn't really fit in with the loose concept, but it's a really good track. I think people always forget how good Sabbath were and have been at ballads, going back to Changes, and I like She's Gone Off Technical Ecstasy. And of course, there's ballady elements in the Dio era were really, really good. So this is a good track, and then it finishes with Heaven in Black. So I think perhaps, apart from sort of Odin's Court and the Battle of Tyr, TYR, or how we pronounce it, it's okay. It's not a great finisher. So I'm kind of torn, like I say, between whether I think Headless Cross or this is better. Now I'm kind of sitting here going through the albums, I kind of maybe think TYR's maybe better. It certainly benefits from having the security of that lineup and the production. So the next, what happens is obviously Dio, they get back with Dio, they do Dehumanize album, but they still stay on the RS album label. Cozy, Tony Iommi wanted Cozy in the band, but Ronnie Dio didn't really get on with Cozy, so the Apache came back. Dehumanize excellent, obviously we know Dio didn't want to support Ozzy, they fell out, Rob Halford filled in, and Tony Iommi's ringing Tony Martin up again, oh can you come back? And they make the Cross Purposes album. So again, this benefits from better production, you know, less bombastic. It's actually Rockfield in Wales where it's recorded. A little longer, 47 minutes. So there's that thing where the albums are getting longer now in the CD era. I think this album's good. I think it just probably like the Eternal Idol. It probably lacks. It's a better album than I think, but it probably lacks. Enough standout cuts. I think one of the other criticisms of this, there is slightly kind of 90s things creeping in. There's a track where I think it's Virtual Death or Psychophobia is quite Alice in Chains, not in a bad way, just Virtual Death, pardon me. Immaculate Deception's a track that's got like an odd timing, but anyway, it opens with Eyewitness and Cross of Thorns, and they're really good. Cross of Thorns are excellent. I think this is again for me one of the standout cuts of the Martin era. Psychophobia's it's a good riff, but it lacks melody. That's what I was saying before. There's this start of this 90s lack of melody coming in, and it will go worse for the next album. Virtual Death's got good riffing, a little messy. Immaculate Deception already mentioned. Dying for Love's a good power ballad. Back to Eden's got a really good groove, that's a good track. Hannah Rocks a Cradle's okay, and then it finishes with Cardinal Sin and Evil Eye. Evil Eye is really good, that's got like a really kind of bluesy evil riff. I like that track. The Cardinal Sin's kind of deep purplish, kind of Perfect Strangers era a bit, so I'd probably give this album like a 6.5 out of 10. Like I say, it kind of starts and finishes really strong, a little more drifty in the middle, but again, it's not going down low. I should just mention that Geezer Butler returns on bass on this. Obviously, he decided to stick around after the thing with Dio. And Bobby Rondelli's on drums, and he does a really good job. In actual fact, the drum sound is pretty harsh on this. It's not massively bombastic, but it is kind of a bit hard sounding. But anyway, so then finally, Cozy Powell, they've done another album, I think. Cozy Powell and Neil Murray come back to make the Forbidden album. But this, if there's one album in the Black Sabbath canon that slips below a threshold, I think it's this. There's problems with the production. It's produced by Ernie C of Ice-T fame. It's got a muddy sound, but the big problem with this album is it's the lack of melody and trying to be trendy. I mean, the opening track, Illusion and Power, has a rap on it featuring Ice-T, and that's that's not the kind of collaboration that's right for them. Black Sabbath, Get a Grip. That hasn't got the cool riff, but there's no melody. Yeah, the third track, Can't Get Close Enough, it's kind of got a Megalomania style riff, but it's not great. Track 4 is Shaking Off the Chains, that's actually in 7/8 time, but again, no melody. I Won't Cry For You's kind of ballad, more in the Tony Martin era, sort of traditional ballad style, but not one of the better ones. Track 6, Guilty as Hell's got a great riff, but isn't memorable. 7, I've just put drab here. Track 8's Rusty Angels, that's got a kind of poor drone type riff. I don't know if you remember, is it Sins of the Father off Dehumanize? It's got that cool kind of Mixolydian D-string drone type riff, but this doesn't work. Weirdly enough, the album finishes probably with the only 2 good tracks, which is the title track, Forbidden, and then Kiss of Death. They're pretty, they're good. So one of the things, I mean, there's rumours of Tony Iommi remastering these albums and remixing Forbidden, and I think if you get back with Tony Martin and find a couple of willing people, he shouldn't go out as Black Sabbath, and I don't think he'll be allowed to do that, but I absolutely think if he said Tony Iommi and put his guest musicians on, maybe Neil Murray could do it, bass, and he goes out, he should tour this, and he'd be well capable of filling, you know, provincial theatres like Newcastle City Hall, places that sell 2,000. And he could do a good selection from these albums, including the Seven Star album. Now, I've actually just done a little kind of, you know, you could do Turn to Stone, The Shining, off Seven Star, and off Eternal Idol. Then you could do Headless Cross, When Death Calls Devil and Daughter, off Headless Cross. Eyewitness and Cross of Thorns from the Cross Purposes album. And a Monday, The Lawmaker from Tear, and Forbidden, something like that. There's about 10 tracks there. And then fill out the rest with kind of 4 Aussie tracks and 4 Dio tracks. You know, give them like a 100-minute show. You know, I'd pay to see it. But yeah, so that's my little run through the Tony Martin era albums. If you are, you know, interested in checking them out, I would dive in, listen to the Headless Cross and the TYR album. If you want better production, go with the TYR album, or pick out some of the tracks. If you don't like those, you're not going to like it, but they are worth looking into, and it's something I've enjoyed. So remember to share and subscribe, and I'll see you again soon with that Black Sabbath album ranking. Cheers.